All right, so for the sake of the recording, hi everyone, I'm Veethika and I'm the product designer for Verify CI. And today I would be presenting about design work that I'm doing for visualizing merge trains. And before I begin, I want to set the context and talk a little more about why I chose to speak about this today. So as a designer, when I work on my day-to-day stuff, I usually know, I'm usually aware of the context that I'm going to address. Like I have a little knowledge around the subject, the topic, and I generally have an idea about if I'm improving an experience, if I'm redefining an experience. But what about the situation? So how does one navigate through the process when there is no experience in place and all we have in picture is an abstraction of a highly technical process? And the task is to make this abstract process or feature, which is already loved in its current form by users, more usable. Um, and apart from that, this particular case study is a really good example about how the development team, the user experience team, and our users from the community, we all got together to shape a brief, not to define a solution, but to shape the brief before it could even begin. All right, so the topic for today is merge train. So goes without saying that I should be introducing this a little bit. So I would go back to the blog that I wrote, and this sentence, it kind of very crisply defines what merge trains really do. Like in the most simple words, what is it that merge trains do? So they automatically merge a series of merge requests without breaking the target branch. So it's this win-win nature of this feature that makes it so lovable. If anyone wants to get into the depth of how this thing, like how does this thing function and what goes in the background when all we see in the front end is the merge request being queued and getting merged. So you can just go through this blog. Okay. All right. So the issue in question, like the issue in focus today is this one that says design merge train visualization. At this point, like when this issue was created, we did not have a very concrete idea about what is it going to be. Is it going to be a widget? Is it going to be just a graph for visualizing the train? And I swear I had no idea that this would end up, like at least the brief would end up being about a whole page, uh, a merge train index page. So let's see how this evolved. Now, when this work was started, the seed information that I had at hand from all my sources, which is our development team, the product management, and everyone who had worked on merge train before, was that there is an active train in merge train, and that active train at one point of time could have 20 merge train pipelines running. That was the limit. But there was no limit as to how many number of items we could queue to the train. And it is also important for users to know that besides those 20 pipelines which are probably running, if we have 20 merge requests in the queue, what else is in the queue? Like what else is waiting to be merged? Then users were also interested in looking at the history of the trains from the past. So it was like they were interested in seeing like what are the trains which were there yesterday and what are the merge requests that were a part of that train, when were they merged, and who triggered the merge train pipeline, and all kinds of information. Now, besides that, the two things from the usability point of view that I had in mind that I should be addressing was that users shouldn't have to go to a different page to take related additional action on the MR. So let's say if I am showing some information on the visualization, I shouldn't break that shouldn't be a disruption in the workflow. Like they shouldn't have to change the page like I would be doing in this presentation a lot. They shouldn't be changing tabs and pages to just perform one small related action. And the other one was all the information regarding the MRs should be placed in close proximity. So it shouldn't be like what something is under this tab, something is under some other page altogether. So everything should be together so that it kind of creates a wholesome context for users. And they could take better decision and more confident decisions based on that. All right. So let's go and have a look like with all of this information, what was it that I really did? So here's the very first draft of the design, and you can see that I started off with putting a visualization on the top. And because I figured that it was also important to show the queued merge requests and the train history, so I thought maybe we can go with the patterns that we are familiar with already in GitLab and place them under two tabs. It was a challenge to decide like what would go under like these tables, what information is relevant, what isn't, but the best way to decide that is to put something out there, show it to people who know more about it or are user of the feature, and then take their feedback, which is exactly what I did. So here, what I proposed was that there would be a section that would only show the active merge train, which is the pipelines which are running at the moment. And I had shown this running pipeline icon along with some details about the merge uh, requests which are queued, and talking about a little bit of the interaction. So what I thought that we would provide to the user was using this ellipsis menu, maybe they would still get an option to remove from the merge train and merge immediately. So they don't have to go to the merge request, like back to the merge request if they want to take these actions. And then maybe on hover, we can show information like a little more detail about the merge request, the person who added and when was this added, then the pipeline, the merge train pipeline, which is running. If someone wants to go and have a deeper look into that, there should also be a way to do that. Then some information about what's the expected merge time. And below in the queued merge request column, again, I gave this option, like if your merge request is queued to be added to the merge train, you could still make a choice of removing that from the train if you're not satisfied with how much time it's going to take and you think that you should probably just merge it sooner using another merge strategy. That flexibility should be there. And then I introduced some other fancy interactions. I mean, I did not have much confidence on that, but to gain confidence, it was important that I share this with the developers. I did get the due feedback around this. So idea was that maybe in this train, users could just pick a merge request and move around in the same train and change the sequence of the train. Users would love to do that, probably. I don't know. All right, so let's see now what was the feedback that I received on that. So first of all, the visualization, many people said that it's fine, it is visualized, but it does not communicate a sense of action and progress. Like there was no progression that was communicated through this visualization up here. And the next was that the visualization does not tell what happens to the MRs in the train. So right now, I mean, people said that they could see that the merge requests are queued. They don't even know like what happens when they're not queued. What happens after this, they hit the 0 minute and where do they really go? Um, the next was, there was like more interested in the queued items compared to the history. Like more users were interested in this tab rather than the train history. They said, I want to see like the item that I have put in the queue, like how far along is it in the process of getting merged, rather than going to the history first and checking like about the past merge requests. So definitely the sequence had to be changed here. And the other feedback was information about the time is broken into too many parts. And I kind of get that when I revisit this, that it's like 4 hours, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, like all over. So of course, there was some problem with that. Then the pipeline icon in the pills doesn't help with the identification. Maybe an avatar would help, an avatar of the person who probably added this merge request to the train. So, and if you look in like in retrospection, when I look, so all of them, they have this running. And it was kind of implied that if they are a part of the active merge train, the pipelines, they have to be running. So what's the need of this double affordance up here? All right, so this was the feedback. But there were also a bunch of technical feedback that I received, which further simplified this whole concept for me, but at least in my head. So the technical feedback were showing the ETA could be tricky. It wouldn't be accurate. Then more than one MR could be merging at the same time. So right now what I'm communicating is there's a sequence and there's a time, like they're lined up, but that might not be the case. The case would be like few things are happening in a parallel, and it wouldn't be like one after the other, maybe two together, three together, or something like that. Then removing and merging immediately are destructive actions that will disrupt all the running motion pipelines. So I am talking about giving this interaction of chaining the sequence, but this is actually very disruptive. And I think the consequences of doing this, it outweighs the delight of the interaction. So maybe we should be dropping this or considering this later when we have a changed infrastructure to support this. But along on the same lines, this particular action that I gave here for queuing, even this will have some effect. So, and even this one that says here, remove from the train and merge immediately. So there should be a proper like disclaimer provided to the users to educate them about what would be the consequences if they chose to perform this action. The other one was train history could be really long, should only show recent history at first. So the history tab that I provided here, if we say that we'll be loading all the merge requests which were merged as a part of the previous trains, this list could just go on, and it wouldn't be very performance friendly. So it's better to show just the recent ones first. And if users, they want to dig deeper, they would probably just go click on a show more button and see for themselves, like what else is there. Then the MRs couldn't be shown over a timeline, maybe a Gantt chart. So just what I highlighted before, that there's no established sequence in here. So, and things might be happening in parallel. So maybe Gantt chart is a better representation. And this time scale, it just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so this was the information that I had at hand, and I had to do something with it. So let's see what I ended up creating. So here is the new design that I worked on, and I try to incorporate all of the feedback that I just went through. For example, I try to communicate through this chart here that there is a progression in the train, and what is happening is these merge requests that we see, they're not just vanishing into the air, they're actually going and merging into the target branch. And so when that happens, when the merging happens, what I'm saying is there'll be a blurb that will appear on the target branch, and this is going to fade away, but for an instance, it will communicate to users that something happened, like something got merged and it got added to the target branch. And also there would be a proper motion that would be shown here. So if this thing disappears after getting merged, we would say that, like we would show that the train is kind of moving from left to right and the elements are actually moving towards that direction. So those small little things will matter a lot in this experience. And apart from that, I just removed the scale because that was a lot of commitment, given that we are not equipped to show the exact ETA. So we better not show that this whole train on a scale, because that would, in that way, we'd be communicating wrong information to the users, which is not prescribed. Instead, what we can do is we can show an ETA in this pop-up up here. So in the time section, it can say when it was added and when is the expected time to merge. And as you can see, I have removed those extra information, like when it was added by the person from the same line where the avatar is placed, and only retain what's necessary. For example, the pipeline information, it has to be kept separate. So I have just kept it separate, and everything else just remains the same. Now, talking about this particular interaction, so now I'm saying, like, when users click on remove, they would get to see this confirmation box, and the text in the confirmation box is in final is just an indicator, is just to indicate that there would be a confirmation box in picture. So yeah, this is it. And similarly, when we click on one of these, it would be the same. And apart from that, there's also an animation that I have created. I hope this is it. No, this one is it. Just to show like what happens. So if MRs are ready to be merged, what will happen? Like visually, they would be turning green to indicate that this is a success and this is going to get merged. And when they're merged, they would appear up here, and a little detail would appear for a while, and slowly those elements would fade away as the train progresses. This is not a very actual and great representation. Like I know the animation could have been better, but in the limited time, this was all that I could put together. So yeah, this was it. And what else? What else? Yeah, and talking about the interaction, so I use the auto merge in Figma just to show an example of how we can, change the sequence. So maybe we pick it up from here, and there can be flexibility to just put it at any place and changing the sequence of the train. But I still have my doubts if this is really a valuable feature that we should be providing on this page. But um, everything else is kind of, it aligns with the feedback that we had received. And that was it. And what is next in the process? So this is right now I'm in the design stage. And of course, the following stage would be validation. So I would be meeting with users to see if we are actually delivering value through the solution. And based on the inputs that we receive, we will be making improvements and finally breaking down the issue into many, many iterations so that it is easier for the development team to take it up and develop them. And that was it. And I'm ready for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think the first one is from Rayana.
I'm biased because I was the one working on merge trains, I think more than 2 years ago. So I'm really happy to see how it's progressing, and I'm happy to see that Veethika is asking questions that I asked 2 years ago, but I didn't have the room to validate. I didn't have the room to ask those questions to the internal customers, well, mostly internal customers, delivery team, because we just had to ship that feature. So I don't have a question per se, but I just wanted to, we might shout out kudos to Veethika for demystifying merge trains, because it's such a complex feature that has so many edge cases. And that's when I see in the UI, like you show something, but hey, wait, there is also this scenario. There's also this permission. There's also another thing that we might have not predicted yet. So kudos. And I shared here just for the sake of, curiosity, my first balsamic prototype, but also the initial MVC for parallel merge trains. And my first experimentation was actually this index page. I wanted to visualize it to understand merge trains. So if you're curious later on to see how we went, how we progressed, I linked here in the agenda. So
thank you so much.
That's my comment. And Marcel, you have the next question, the actual question.
Thank you. It's also not really a question. I just wanted to mention that I really loved, in especially your first iteration, how similar to actual train wagons you made the merge requests look. I think this was a great idea of really doubling down on the mental model and connecting the visual identity with how we are naming this feature and how we're communicating it to our users. And I think this was a really, really cool idea.
So you're saying that this representation was, I could still consider it because it's still in design. It's really good to hear that feedback. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I think Pedro is also gonna chime in on this one in his next question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Veethika. Very interesting exploration, and especially taking the concept, as Marcel mentioned, of the train wagons. At least to me, it mapped very well to how I picture it in my mind. So it's very interesting that you're exploring it. Although from your explanation and even how you were phrasing things in your presentation of the visualization at the top and the table below, it seemed like you were at a certain point you were forced somehow to replicate the same or most of the information that you have in the visualization into a table format. And so my question is, if you have considered just using the table instead of the visualization, because at least to me, it seems to provide the most or all of the information and in a much more accessible way.
That's right. So in fact, if I just introduce a new tab that says active train and put all of these 20 ones in that tab, that would in fact do some, it would mostly give all the information that's needed that I'm trying to portray in the visualization. But this being such a very complex thing, I want users to have a visual idea about how things are happening. And plus, there was also another supporting idea that maybe inspired by this, there could be a mini visualization that we could probably make a part of the widget someday. Or this design is not final, right? So maybe just putting this visualization from here and placing it in the pipeline index page, because this is still about like the merge train and the pipelines, merge train pipelines and their progress. Um, but yeah, I like that you're trying to make a case against this because no one else has. And I would definitely consider like thinking on those lines, like, is it really providing a higher value than as opposed to if I place the same information in a different tab in the table?
Yeah, I think so. To me, it seems duplicating information and actions, the visualization and the table. And in a way, the table already provides already orders the merge requests in the order that you need them, right? So you can even translate what you have at the top using the horizontal to a vertical train, right? So
Oh,
you can change that perspective. So I think the train can still be effective if it's vertical instead of being horizontal. Because as
right.
Nadia is going to ask further down, there's also the difference, like why is it left to right or right to left, or it can change from people's perspective. So yeah, that's my question to
Right.
you. And I still think that even what you were just showing, that animation of when something gets merged, could even be more accessible if you relied on the table, because you could put, for example, a banner at the top saying while the user has the page open, if a merge request is merged, you could say 1 or 2 merge requests have been merged just now. Click here to see the train history, for example. And so I
That's
think
interesting.
it would also make a closer connection with the train history tab, because to me, that's, in my mind, that's what would happen. The first merge request would disappear and move into the other tab, which is right above it. So yeah, food for thought.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So right now there's no duplication happening. Uh, what you see here, these are the running pipelines, and the items in the queued merge request, they don't have a running pipeline. I mean, that's the only difference. But yeah, what you said was interesting, and I should be exploring this. So one reason that the exploration started on a very different on this note, because the demand was that we should be creating a visualization, and that it was through Slack channel and also through various other TAMs and essays, like saying that their customers are demanding um, a solution for visualizing their merge train. So it was kind of biased towards that side.
Yeah. I'm going to jump into my comment because it's a follow-up of what Pedro said. When I look at this, I feel like, how would this look on a smaller screen? How would this look, for example, on mobile, right? I assume that people, knowing a little bit of the personas, that they wouldn't really go into this page to manage the merge trains. But when I look at the UI, the graph, and the table, I would like to see how you would solve this problem in a smaller viewports and what you would prioritize. Would that be the active train UI? Would that be the table? And what would that mean to the users? And that's part of one of my question / comments. And the other thing is that since the merge order can change, I wonder if you thought about this page being reloaded, or if you thought about the mechanism where users can manually say refresh to see the order changing of the position, since, I don't know, a merge can fail and then the next one would take the place of, I don't know, a number in the train.
Yeah, that's a good feedback. That was not considered.
One final piece about this. I'm curious if users need to have this strict differentiation between active train and the queued merge requests. I'm not sure if that's really the most important distinction between these different merge requests for the users. And if maybe we could even say, like, all of these are part of the merge train, but just the 20 first ones have a running pipeline. I'm wondering if that could also remove some confusion here, because for the first couple of minutes, I actually thought the information in the top, the active train, is the exact same one as in the queued merge request, but they seem to be different information, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that could be done. I mean, that should be done because one main difference why I try to keep them separate was these 20 pipelines which are running, they are very much dependent on each other, and it would be very disruptive if something is taken away from there, as compared to I try to remove this one from the train, be as critical action. But if we include the same elements here in this and maybe name this differently and show that the pipeline is running for those particular 21s, right?
Yep, that could absolutely.
What is the
Go ahead.
difference between the active train and the queued merge requests?
The active trains have a pipeline running, a merge train pipeline running. And you know how the merge train pipelines are built, right? Like they are kind of the IID. I mean, this block kind of explains it. I don't want to say random words, but they kind of depend on what's before them and what's after them. And at one point of time, only 20 pipelines could run. So these are the, that's considered an active train.
Okay, so if we were to take or think about this in a with our existing pipelines, it would be almost as only the 21st pipelines can run, and then other pipelines are pending because the runner can only have 20. So when one of the pipelines exits the list, the other one comes in, and so on, right?
Right, that's how it is.
Okay.
I tried to show that using this badge. So if we have more than 20, this will always show 20. If we have less than 20, then it will show that number. Yeah. Nadia, you were asking something?
Yeah. How did you gather feedback on this? Did you do solution validation with user testing or internally, or I'm just curious, like what methods did you use?
So first of all, because I was shooting in the dark and I did not really know what I was creating. So I thought a good first step is to just collect information in the issue itself. So everybody came down. I asked a lot of questions and all of them, they were answered. And that's how the first brief was created. So taking that information, I started designing. Then this was shared on Twitter and this was also shared internally. So all the engineers who were involved and when they saw me distorting the concept, they came in to tell me what was going wrong. And that was one way. And there were some users who took lead from Twitter and came here and dropped their comments.
Yeah, makes sense. I think as you explore more ideas about how to present this, and it could be useful to do some solution validation, maybe on user testing, to test different prototypes to see what works better, because there are many different ways to visualize this. And we're dealing with similar things on pipeline authoring, where we're also considering a table to visualize pipelines. So it can also work. It can be a valid approach.
Yeah, definitely. This needs to be validated.
Awesome. I'm gonna need to stop the conversation here because we are already running against the time. Thank you so much for this super interesting presentation. And I think we already saw how complex the topic is and what a great job you really did. And I loved it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the feedback, everyone.